Petrol is extremely dangerous. The vapours are explosive and petrol splashed into your eyes could result in a nasty eye injury and a trip to A&E. You should have a fire extinguisher readily to hand, such as powder, foam or possibly CO2 to tackle Class B fires. With that said, if you have a need to remove the fuel from your Mini because it's aged or possibly gone off, then this video might be of interest to you. The Mini fuel tank holds about 50 litres or 11 Imperial UK gallons. In money, that's £60 at £1.20 a litre. In this video, I will also see how quickly I can pump 5 litres of fuel out of this car. But before we do that, we need to pop the bonnet open. So down in the driver's footwell, we just pop that lever, up the bonnet pops, and the lever's on the right hand side and it goes up hydraulically. So it's a good idea to check the condition of your battery first. I'm just going to pop a meter on here and see what voltage we've got. This is quite an old battery, but this method will be using the battery only to pump the fuel. So it's looking a bit low there, probably 12.2 volts, but that probably is sufficient for this. So here's a couple of photographs relating to the fuel pipes. In this photo you can see the fuel rail cover, the fuel pipe and the fuel tank vent valve. And now with that cover removed, we can see the fuel pipe leading to the fuel rail. And there in green is the fuel pipe retaining clip. And at the end of the fuel rail there's actually a place you can fit a fuel pressure gauge. And if you were to press that pin in, the fuel pressure in the fuel rail would be depressurised, releasing a small amount of petrol. And now to disconnect that fuel pipe. So we're just going to pop the fuel rail cover off. It's clipped on at the back here, so pop those two clips, lift it forward and lift the dipstick out of the way, and it should just pop forward and off. You can see the clips there. So we'll put that to one side, put a bit of tissue down because we will get some fuel spillage, and we should put some sort of eye protection on now because this could be pressurised from the last time the engine was run. So I'm just trying to move this pipe out of the way now. Now the retaining clip is black here, and we basically just push that retaining clip back and the fuel pipe will come off like so. There we are. Normally you would get a bit of fuel loss at that point. So what I've made is a bit of a drain pipe, and it's using quite a thick tube to start with. There's the dimensions there, which we pop over the end like so, and I've used like a 22mm to 15mm coupling leading to a different diameter pipe, and that will then lead to a Demijohn. So we don't do wine making, but we did think Demijohns are useful for many other things, like collecting petrol. Okay, so time to pump some petrol out. Okay, so we're going to find out how many turns of the ignition key, which will energise the priming of the pump, it would take to fill this Demijohn. I mean, this method's not ideal. Siphoning would be more logical, but siphoning doesn't seem to work. I mean, you could remove the sender unit in the fuel tank and then pump the fuel out that way again, but then you're disturbing the seal on the sender unit. So this is one method of doing it, although not ideal. So anyway, so what are we up to now? About 9 turns has given us about a litre of fuel. And once I've worked out how many turns it would be, I'm then going to see how quick I can actually get a gallon or 5 litres out of this car once I've recharged the battery and that. So we're looking like it's going to be about 30 turns. And then, like I say, I'll put the car back on charge, and then I'm going to try a different type of connector as well. Now to carefully pour the petrol into a more suitable and stable container. So I'm now going to decanter this petrol into a far more suitable container with a sealed lid. Obviously I will put a face shield on for this because I really don't want petrol to splash in my eyes. Now while I do that, might be a chance to say something about actual petrol and how it actually goes off. So as part of the renewable energy agreement, petrol actually contains 5% or up to 5% ethanol. Super unleaded is normally ethanol free, and over time, if petrol is left in an unsealed container, it will evaporate completely. As it evaporates, different components will evaporate at different rates, gradually leaving the petrol to change from its original specifications. Petrol surprisingly only has a life of 1 year in a container with an intact seal. Once the seal is broken, its life shortens to 6 months if stored at 20 degrees centigrade, or you can halve that to 3 months at 30 degrees centigrade. BP gives a storage life of 1 month once in a fuel tank and suggests topping up by 1/3 of fresh fuel to restore the volatile components that will have been lost through evaporation. When stored in a fuel tank, BP says that after 5 weeks the fuel will be 5% heavier, and therefore the fuel to air mix will contain more fuel, thus leading to your engine running richer, possibly contaminating the spark plugs and increasing the fuel consumption. If you cannot drain the fuel out and the vehicle might be stored for more than 2 months, then they advise filling the tank completely, as this will minimise condensation forming inside the tank, and to add a fuel stabiliser. Okay, so the fuel is now in the container. We'll pop the lid on that and try our next part. Since the battery wasn't in great shape to start with, I've had it on charge for the next part of this video. I now want to see how quickly I can pump 4.5 litres or 1 gallon out and calculate the time it would take to empty a full tank of fuel from a Mini. So it's looking like it's as charged up as it can be. So we'll just unplug that. I did make sure all the fuel had evaporated first before putting the battery on charge, because obviously there is a risk of a spark, and there was a lot of fuel vapour around at the time. It will now show me depressurising the fuel rail after it's just been primed to pressure, and also by pressing the pin in on the valve that's at the end of the fuel rail. So in this demonstration with the fuel rail fully primed, this will give you an idea how much fuel can come out and why eye protection is definitely a sensible precaution. And then I'll prime it up again and then release it from the end valve, which is normally for the pressure meter gauge for testing the fuel rail pressure. But we can pop the pin in and release the pressure and see how much fuel will come out of that point. I'm going to cover that with my hands, because again it came out under quite a bit of pressure. So we'll best leave all that now to evaporate before we start playing with the ignition. So we certainly got a bit of petrol now on that engine, and that needs to evaporate first. I will now use a drain hose using the technically correct adapter, though the other method worked just as well. So for this demonstration I'll now use, I guess you could call it a technically correct adapter, as opposed to just a pipe over the outside of this end. I'll put a picture on the side now, and these are like pressure testing kits with a lot of adapters, and obviously one for the Mini is in there. So I've connected that to a pipe instead. I think those kits are between £20 to £50 or something. So I'm just going to pop a tray underneath the Demijohn, because obviously I'm going to be pumping the fuel as quickly as possible. So just in case it was to overflow, I can catch some, because obviously I don't want to put any into the earth, creating pollution. And we should be ready for the speed test. See how fast we can pump fuel. So hopefully this will work, as I now need to sync 3 separate cameras to show everything that's going on at once. So we'll start the timer. We're obviously not in the car yet, so bit of an unfair advantage there for the timer. Okay, about 10 seconds in and we're started. So I know that I've got to turn this key basically 30 times, which will keep that pump going effectively continuously. So what are we at? 30 seconds, we've got a litre. I've sped this up to double speed. Where are we up to now? Where's a minute going to get us? 2 litres there. So nearly 2.5 litres in 1 minute. So that is pretty quick. So this is actually probably quite an effective way of getting fuel out of your car. It's probably just as quick as siphoning, because this is actually being pumped out. And it's nearly full. Oh, we've got a notification on the phone there. And the timer's still going. So well under 2 minutes. So with that little test done, we can now uncouple it. Like so. Same method. Just push back on the black part. It should release it. And then we can safely pop that back onto the fuel rail. Like so. And clip our little piece of plastic pipe back into position. So I need to now put that fuel into a suitable container, and note I am wearing a face mask to avoid any splashes, especially when doing that pipe work there. So while I'm doing that, let's try and do a little bit of maths here. So the timer was actually at 11 seconds before fuel was being pumped, and it finished at 1 minute 46. That would mean at least 4.5 litres was pumped out in 1 minute 35. So in theory, a full tank contains 50 litres. Divide 50 by 4.5 gives us 11.11. Times that by 95 seconds is 1055 seconds. And then divide that by 60 for minutes is 17 minutes 59. So basically you could, if you had to empty your mini fuel tank using this method, you could do it in under 20 minutes. Though that would mean you had to flick the ignition key on some 333 times, if my maths is correct. Now to put the fuel rail cover back on. So what you've got to do is, if you lift the oil dipstick out the way, you can then normally just push the 2 pop-on things at the bottom onto the fuel rail, and then there's a couple of plastic clips at the top. I've zoomed in here so you can see them, and then we just push those in and push it down, and then don't forget to put the dipstick back in. Job done. I'm now going to start the engine just to hear that timing chain slap around as a reminder that I need to mend this Mini pretty soon. Best get some charge back into that battery, as car batteries never like to be left in a deeply discharged state. So we get this on charge now. So hopefully the battery doesn't get completely ruined. And here's some reference photographs for this video. So here's the fuel pipe disconnected, and the outside diameter of this is 19.28 millimeters. And for reference, the pipe it goes onto is 7.89 millimeters. And here's the pipe that I made, and these are the pieces I used, which was a piece of 15mm copper pipe, a 22 to 15mm reducer, Jubilee clip, and a couple of bits of tubing. And another view of those items. And here's the adapter I used, which was in that kit. This photo was shown before of the fuel rail cover, fuel pipe, and the fuel tank vent valve. And with that cover removed, we can see the fuel pipe retaining clip and the pipe to fuel rail regulator. And this was the location of the gauge valve. And then with the plastic cover removed, showing the little pin. And finally, the fuel pressure test kit with all the adapters. This video was made for a man called Dave. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video helped you decide whether to take that petrol out or just leave it there. My answer was in this video at £1.20 a litre, that's £60. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, and I'm also available on Instagram and Facebook.